The first shot rings out, sharp and deafening in the sudden silence of the office. Everyone freezes, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. On the floor, the head of Barry Norris, the affable HR rep, lolls at an unnatural angle, a crimson stain already blossoming on the pristine white carpet around his temple. His spectacles, miraculously still perched on his nose, are splattered. Panic, a tangible entity, begins to ripple through the crowded floor. No one can comprehend what they've just witnessed. Only moments ago, they were all trying to make sense of the metallic plates that spontaneously sealed the building's windows and doors, the ominous disembodied voice that issued a chilling ultimatum. Now, that voice has been proven terrifyingly real, its threat made horrifically manifest. The air crackles with an intensity that promises more violence, more death, and a complete unraveling of everything they once understood about their mundane corporate lives. The realization dawns cold and hard. This is no drill. It began subtly, with a low hum that vibrated through the floorboards, quickly followed by the clunk and grind of metal. Without warning, thick steel plates slammed down over every window, every exit, plunging the high-rise office building into a sudden, claustrophobic twilight. Then came the voice, a calm, synthetic baritone emanating from the intercom system, its words cutting through the rising murmur of confusion with chilling clarity. It informed them, quite matter-of-factly, that they were part of an experiment. They were to kill 2 of their colleagues within the next 30 minutes, or it would begin killing for them. Laughter, nervous and disbelieving, had broken out. Some assumed it was a prank, a team-building exercise gone horribly awry. But the metallic seals, unyielding and impenetrable, told a different story. The voice remained, a patient, unyielding presence, reiterating its demand, its tone growing subtly more menacing with each repetition. The smiles faded, replaced by frowns of unease, then outright fear. This wasn't a joke. Chaos erupted. Small groups formed, some huddling together for comfort, others arguing vociferously about what to do. Michael, the operations manager, a man usually calm and collected, found himself overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the terror. He tried to take charge, his voice booming over the din, but his words were lost in the rising tide of hysteria. Danny, Michael's assistant, a quiet woman, clung to him, her face pale. Up on the executive floor, the CEO, a man named covertly as the Voice, remained aloof, seemingly unfazed by the unfolding nightmare, while others scrambled for explanations. Mike, a seasoned employee with a pragmatic streak, started looking for ways out, testing the steel plates, futilely trying to pry them open. The clock in everyone's mind was ticking, counting down to the impossible deadline set by the unseen orchestrator. The initial shock was giving way to a desperate scramble for survival, each person processing the horrific ultimatum in their own, terrifying way. The collective fear was a palpable weight in the air. Some screamed, others wept openly, their mascara streaking down their faces. A few, like Terry, a security guard, instinctively reached for their sidearms, only to realize the building's internal security had been disabled. Vince, the IT guy, frantically tried to hack into the intercom system, convinced it was just a sophisticated prank. But the Voice, when it returned to warn them of the dwindling time, responded to Vince's attempts with a chillingly specific threat, proving its awareness and control. Michael, watching the disintegration of order, felt a cold dread seep into his bones. His girlfriend, Lena, was in the building, and the thought of her facing this terror spurred him into action, even as his own mind reeled. The building, once a symbol of corporate ambition, had transformed into a cage, and its occupants, once colleagues, were rapidly becoming desperate, terrified animals. The impossible choice loomed, a monstrous shadow over every interaction, every thought. 2 dead or more would follow. The chilling calculus had begun. The Voice, patient but firm, reiterated its demand. 30 minutes, 2 lives, or it would choose. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the screams. Every eye darted around, assessing, judging, fear overriding all semblance of civility. Mike, ever the logical one, proposed a lottery, a way to democratically choose who would be sacrificed, a grim attempt at rationalizing the irrational. But the idea was met with horror and outrage. Lena, her face etched with fear, clung to Michael, her eyes pleading for reassurance he couldn't give. Barry, the kind HR rep, tried to mediate, to appeal to their shared humanity, to reason with the unseen tormentor. He spoke of family, of ethics, of the sheer depravity of the demand. His words, however, only seemed to irritate the voice. A new countdown began, faster, more insistent. The air grew heavy with unspoken accusations and the dawning, awful understanding that they were truly on their own, caught in a game with no rules, only consequences. Desperate attempts to escape intensified. A group of younger employees, fueled by adrenaline and defiance, tried to batter down one of the steel plates covering a fire exit. They used chairs, fire extinguishers, even their own bodies, but the steel held firm, unyielding. Lena, tears streaming down her face, called her family, only to find her phone dead. All communication lines, both internal and external, had been severed. The building was an impenetrable fortress, designed to keep them in, not out. Even the water fountains had stopped working, a subtle but effective way to add to their discomfort and stress. The stark reality of their predicament was sinking in. There was no outside help coming. No police, no firefighters. No one to hear their desperate pleas. The only voices that mattered now were the disembodied one over the intercom and the increasingly frantic voices of their colleagues. The 30-minute timer on the intercom continued its relentless march, a constant, auditory reminder of the impending horror. As the final seconds of the first deadline ticked away, a palpable tension filled the air, so thick it was hard to breathe. Everyone braced themselves, some covering their heads, others staring numbly at the intercom speaker. The voice returned, its tone a shade colder now, disappointed. They had failed to comply. A series of metallic clicks echoed through the building, followed by sharp, muffled thuds. Then the screams began. 2 employees, one on the main floor, another on a different level, collapsed, their heads exploding in grotesque, bloody bursts. Small, unseen charges, implanted in their skulls, had detonated. The sheer horror of it was unbearable. People shrieked, scrambling away from the bodies, their minds struggling to process the impossible violence. Michael felt a wave of nausea. Lena was inconsolable, her face buried in his chest. The voice returned, calm as ever, informing them that since they couldn't make the choice, it had. And it would continue to do so unless they started playing by its rules. The game had just become very, very real. The voice, having proven its capability for gruesome enforcement, issued a new directive. This time it was more specific, more demanding. They were to kill 30 more people within the next 2 hours. The number was astronomical, a terrifying escalation from the initial 2. The collective gasp that swept through the office was almost audible. 30. The scale of the proposed slaughter was unimaginable. Arguments erupted again, more desperate, more violent this time. Accusations flew, old resentments resurfaced, fueled by the primal fear of death. Michael, seeing the fragile fabric of their society rapidly tearing apart, knew they were on the brink of total anarchy. Mike, the pragmatic one, started looking at people differently, his eyes calculating. Lena, her face pale and tear-stained, held onto Michael's hand, her grip like a vice. The second timer began its countdown, a relentless digital display on the intercom, each passing second a step closer to either unthinkable murder or mass execution. The building had become a meat grinder, and they were all caught inside. The office began to fracture. Some, led by the pragmatic and increasingly ruthless Mike, argued for compliance, for choosing the 30 to save the many. Others, including Michael, vehemently opposed such a monstrous act, desperate to find an alternative, a way to escape or fight back against their unseen tormentor. The moral lines were drawn, stark and unforgiving. Friends became wary of friends. Colleagues eyed each other with suspicion. Barry, the kind HR rep, still reeling from the initial deaths, tried to appeal to reason, but his voice was drowned out by the rising tide of fear and conflicting ideologies. The air was thick with tension, a silent battle brewing between those willing to sacrifice others for their own survival and those who clung to their humanity, even in the face of certain death. The office, once a place of mundane routine, had transformed into a battleground for the soul, and the voice continued its silent, unseen observation, waiting for its subjects to make their next impossible choice. The stakes were life and death, and the clock was ticking. Barry, his face a mask of profound despair, stood before the others, his voice trembling as he pleaded with them not to give in to the voice's demands. He spoke of the inherent worth of every life, of the slippery slope they would descend if they started killing each other. His impassioned plea was met with a mix of agreement and frustrated desperation. Some nodded, tears in their eyes, while others, particularly those who favored Mike's pragmatic solution, grew impatient. The ticking clock on the intercom system seemed to mock his idealism. He looked around, his gaze falling on Michael, a silent appeal for support. Michael, torn between his moral compass and the crushing reality of their situation, could only offer a grim nod. Barry's efforts were noble, but the fear was too pervasive, the voice's control too absolute. His words, however, resonated with a few, solidifying a small but determined group unwilling to participate in the slaughter. The division was now undeniable, a chasm growing wider with every passing second. Vince, the IT guy, despite the voice's previous warning, resumed his desperate attempts to dismantle the intercom system, convinced that if he could just cut the source, the nightmare would end. He climbed onto a desk, screwdriver in hand, his face etched with frantic determination. Terry, the security guard, knowing the building's layout, started scouting for hidden passages or vents, any obscure route that might lead to freedom. Others, meanwhile, were surreptitiously arming themselves with office supplies, letter openers, staplers, even heavy desk ornaments, a grim preparation for the unthinkable. The illusion of safety and civility had completely shattered. Everyone was now a potential victim, and everyone was a potential threat. The air hummed with a primal energy, a cocktail of fear, anger, and a dawning, terrible resolve. The second deadline loomed, larger and more terrifying than the first, and the building's occupants, once colleagues, were now divided into factions, each battling for their own survival, each facing an impossible moral choice. The overhead intercom crackles to life, an unseen voice ordering the employees of Belko worldwide to kill 2 of their own. A collective murmur of disbelief ripples through the office. Michael, a mid-level manager, tries to rationalize it, suggesting it's a sick prank or a team-building exercise gone horribly wrong. Everyone laughs nervously, but a chill has already settled. Barry Norris, the company's stoic COO, attempts to maintain order, his face a mask of practiced calm. Leandra, Michael's ex-girlfriend and a human resources representative, looks genuinely disturbed, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an explanation. The voice repeats the command, this time with a menacing edge, promising consequences if ignored. Most employees dismiss it, confident in the safety of their modern, high-rise office building in Bogotá, Colombia. They are convinced it's a bizarre, elaborate joke, maybe even a foreign marketing stunt for a new horror film. The security guards, stationed at the entrances, appear as confused and unnerved as anyone else. The allotted time expires. A horrifying, wet thud reverberates through the building. Down in the cafeteria, 2 employees, unfamiliar faces to most, suddenly clutch their heads, their expressions morphing into agony. Before anyone can react, their skulls explode in a grotesque spray of blood and brain matter, sending shockwaves of terror through the entire company. The initial shock gives way to a deafening silence, then a chorus of screams. Panic erupts. People scramble for cover, some openly weeping, others frozen in disbelief. Michael, witnessing the gruesome deaths, feels a cold dread grip his stomach. He realizes with a horrifying certainty that this is no joke. The voice, now accompanied by the blare of a siren, reiterates the command, this time specifying that 30 more employees must die within the next 2 hours, or 60 will be killed at random. The doors to the building clang shut, heavy steel plates sliding down over the windows, plunging the office into a terrifying lockdown. The escape routes are sealed. Michael, his mind racing, remembers an unusual detail from their hiring process. a mandatory, seemingly innocuous GPS tracker implanted at the base of everyone's skull. He approaches one of the deceased, a gruesome task, and carefully examines the wound. There, amidst the gore, he sees a tiny, metallic device, clearly the source of the explosive force. The realization solidifies the horrifying truth. They are all walking bombs. The anonymous voice isn't just threatening. It has the means and the will to execute. Barry, ever the pragmatist, immediately starts assessing the situation, his eyes scanning the terrified faces of his employees, already calculating odds and weaknesses. Leandra, her initial shock giving way to a fierce resolve, tries to comfort a sobbing colleague, but her own fear is palpable. The building, once a symbol of corporate ambition, has transformed into a death trap. The air is thick with a metallic tang, and the silence, punctuated by the distant wails of some employees, is far more terrifying than the screams. The employees splinter into factions. Some, led by the charismatic yet increasingly unhinged Vince, advocate for rebellion, believing they can somehow overpower their unseen tormentors. Others, paralyzed by fear, simply huddle together, hoping for a miracle. Barry, ever the pragmatist, argues for compliance, believing that sacrificing some is the only way to save the majority. He points out the futility of resistance against an invisible, all-powerful enemy. Michael, caught between these extremes, tries to find a third option, a way to escape without resorting to bloodshed. He suggests searching for a hidden exit, or perhaps a way to disable the implants. But the desperation is palpable, and rational thought begins to erode under the immense pressure. The moral compass of the office starts to spin wildly, each person grappling with the unthinkable. The initial camaraderie has dissolved, replaced by suspicion and fear. Every glance is now interpreted, every whisper a potential conspiracy. Barry, seeing the rising chaos and the dwindling time, makes a horrifying decision. He gathers the remaining security guards, who, despite their initial reluctance, are swayed by his forceful personality and the sheer terror of their situation. He arms them with the weapons stored in the building's emergency locker, including several handguns and a shotgun. His argument is stark. Someone has to make the impossible choices for the greater good. He believes that if they don't meet the quota, more will die, and the entire company will be wiped out. He tries to appeal to their sense of duty, their instinct for survival. Michael vehemently opposes this, arguing that they can't descend into savagery. But Barry's voice, usually calm and measured, now carries an unshakable conviction, a chilling resolve. He's not asking for volunteers. He's issuing orders, effectively turning the company into a hunting ground. The guards, their faces pale and their hands trembling, reluctantly follow his lead, their own fear overriding their moral objections. The hunt begins. Barry and the armed guards start systematically rounding up employees, prioritizing those deemed less essential or those who have expressed the most defiance. The once bustling office transforms into a chilling labyrinth of terror. Screams echo through the hallways as people run, hide, and plead for their lives. Michael, horrified, witnesses the cold-blooded efficiency with which Barry orchestrates the killings. He sees friends turn on friends, colleagues betraying each other in a desperate bid for survival. Leandra tries to intervene, her voice cracking with despair, but she's quickly pushed aside. She watches in horror as people she's known for years are dragged away, their protests turning into agonized cries. The air is thick with the smell of gunpowder and fear. The quota for the second phase is slowly, brutally being met. Each gunshot is a hammer blow, shattering any remaining illusions of civility or hope. The cold, mechanical voice from the intercom periodically updates them on the remaining time, each announcement a fresh wave of terror. Unable to stand by and watch the carnage, Michael makes a desperate move. He lunges at a security guard, managing to disarm him in a frantic struggle. He now holds a pistol, his hand shaking, his mind reeling. The act is impulsive, driven by a primal need to stop the bloodshed. He aims the gun, not at Barry, but at the ceiling, firing a shot that momentarily silences the chaos. He tries to rally the remaining unarmed employees, urging them to fight back, to refuse to be victims. Some respond to his plea, their terror briefly replaced by a flicker of defiance. Others, however, are too broken, too scared to resist. Barry, seeing Michael's rebellion, views him as an immediate threat to his horrifying plan. He orders the remaining guards to apprehend Michael, viewing his actions as a direct challenge to the fragile order he has imposed. The office, already a war zone, now has two opposing forces, each convinced of their own righteousness. The third phase of the experiment begins with a new, even more twisted directive. The voice demands that the remaining employees kill a specific, even larger number of people. This time, however, it specifies that the killings must be executed by the employees themselves, without the help of the armed guards. It's a psychological gambit, forcing them to become direct participants in the atrocities. Barry, now fully embracing his role as the Grim Reaper, begins to pit employees against each other, creating impossible scenarios where two people are forced to fight to the death, or one must kill another to save a third. He uses the threat of mass explosion to manipulate them, playing on their deepest fears. Michael, witnessing this horrifying descent into savagery, feels a profound despair. The humanity in the building is rapidly eroding, replaced by a brutal, every man for himself mentality. The office, bathed in the sickly glow of emergency lights, has become a gladiatorial arena. As the body count rises and the building becomes a blood-soaked nightmare, Michael, by a stroke of luck, manages to disable one of the building's internal surveillance cameras during a brief power surge. Looking closely at the dislodged camera, he discovers something chilling. It's not just a security camera. It's a live feed, transmitting to an unknown external location. He also finds a tiny inscription on the camera's housing, a serial number that seems too specific, too deliberately placed. He realizes with a horrifying jolt that their tormentors aren't just listening. They're watching, orchestrating the entire gruesome spectacle for an audience. This isn't just about survival. It's about entertainment, a macabre reality show. The implications are staggering, adding another layer of cold, calculated cruelty to their predicament. The realization fuels a desperate rage within him, a renewed determination to not only survive but expose the architects of this atrocity, even if it means dying in the attempt. He knows the game is rigged, but he's no longer just playing to survive. He's playing to win, or at least to reveal the puppeteers. Driven by this revelation, Michael, along with a small group of defiant survivors, decides to search for the observation room, convinced that if they can find the people behind the cameras, they can somehow stop the madness. They navigate the now deserted hallways, stepping over bodies and avoiding the remaining armed employees who are still hunting for victims. Following the wiring from the disabled camera, they stumble upon a hidden bunker-like room, concealed behind a false wall in the basement. Inside, they find not the tormentors themselves, but a chilling array of monitors, recording equipment, and advanced computer systems, all displaying live feeds of the building's interior. A large, schematic diagram of the entire building is projected onto a wall, with colored dots representing each employee, and a countdown timer ticking relentlessly towards 0. This is the nerve center, the control room for their hellish experiment. It's empty, but the equipment is clearly still active, humming with a sinister energy. They realize the true nature of their predicament. They are part of a meticulously planned, large-scale social experiment, orchestrated by a shadowy organization. The true puppet masters are not in the building, but observing from afar, controlling their fates with chilling precision. They are lab rats in a deadly maze,